Thanks very much. I didn't realise we were getting so many bright lights straight in the eyes, but we'll cope. Well, thanks very much. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you all. Nice to see you still awake and freezing cold. I notice everyone's got their jackets on. Why come to the Gold Coast and freeze? That's not what my plan was. I was here for a suntan. I'm going to talk to you rapidly for about 23 minutes. But first of all, I wanted to say a big thank you to the organisers for letting me be here and for my little stand outside. You're welcome to come and talk to me afterwards if you wish to. I want to give a shout out actually to Jason. I thought it was a fantastic presentation and really good to talk about risk in a very dynamic and open way, especially from the insurance side, because it is quite a us and them in many respects. For a lot of people see it as that way. But when you've got somebody who's approachable, I don't know Jason, so I'm not trying to plug him, but when you get somebody who's approachable as Jason, actually up here selling sort of and being communicating, you really should take advantage of that to get through the mystique of insurance and actually understand that risk mitigation construct. Because it isn't, well, maybe it is difficult, but it's not supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to be pretty straightforward. And if people like Jason can actually sort of be there and talk it through, you really should take advantage of it. I'm going to try and rapidly move through the slides and see if the slide pingy thing works. If not, I'll be nodding quietly to the guy at the back. So I thought we'd start off with a couple of quick questions. Being an academic, I like to ask questions, audience participation and all that. So the first thing is really, the question is, natural disasters, are you ready? And that was easy. That's me finished. I could stop there, but they want me to do a bit more, so I'll keep going. So I could do a whole presentation on climate change and the threats and stuff that come from climate change and the change in temperature, blah, blah, boring. And this is the same in the next one. It's, yeah, we're stuffed. So let's just accept that and move on, because there's no point talking about it. The construct of disasters is very high level. In WHO, we've got a lovely definition of it. You can read it if you want, I wouldn't bother. Or you could look at the sort of the Australian Red Cross and read their definition, equally high level stuff. But from the reality is it affects you on the ground. That's what you care about. You care about the disaster and how it affects me, my business, and the people that are actually at the festivals or the event I'm actually organising. So that top-level construct is pretty much irrelevant. It's how I actually function on the ground, and we're going to try and get into some of that a little bit later. As I say, we could talk about the big disasters, the big sort of headline stuff, lots of bodies and stuff. We don't want to see that sort of stuff at a festival. This isn't our sort of challenge. But the actual sort of key notes from it is the same. The theory, when you're looking at disasters and the research at big disasters, actually spills down to the festivals. And that's the key point I'm trying to make. So the predictability, the controllability, you can read again, but speed of onset, things happen fast. When you're in that sort of environment and things are going wrong, they get wrong very quickly. And you've got to be able to react and respond in a very, very short time to actually do that mitigation, using his words again. He's used a lot of words I'm going to pick up. And I wrote these slides before I heard the presentation, but it's in that risk space, that's the key thing, and duration of the impact itself, and then sort of the scope and the intensity of that impact, because that's what affects the sort of the long-term issues. So this is a Glastonbury photograph, because that's partly what I'm here to talk about. And there's mud everywhere at Glastonbury. You need to remember, this is a farm, actually 4 farms for most of the year. They're functioning farms. It's not a perfect site, it's an imperfect site. Covered in cows, it's a dairy farm. And what do cows produce? Mess. And what did they then do with mud? They pushed the mess, well, it's feces. Let's be quite clear what it is, it's shit. So we're not recording this, are we? I hope not. Not live streaming, I hope. But this is what happens. In Somerset, where this is based, the animals produce a little organism called E. coli. That's not bad, because that's just a normal fecal indicator, and we produce E. coli as well. But they've got one called O157. That's the one that kills you. That's the one you don't want. And 40% of any cows in a field in Somerset at any point in the year are excreting positive O157 where you're going to walk, or swim if you're stupid enough. The good thing about Australia is you don't have E. coli O157, or not in any significant numbers. So threats change. Hazards change and risk changes. So what one festival's got a problem with, the other might not. So that's very important to talk about hazards, and I'll come on to that in a little bit. Mud everywhere. Also, we've got people and machinery in close proximity. That's never a good thing. That's where your hazards change. That's where your risks can increase. If you've got, as we've got here, an untrained operator moving heavy pallets in a muddy field, that's disaster about to happen, at least for those people when they get squashed. And then it's about litigation, and our friend with insurance pops up and says, you can't claim for that, because that's usually the answer. Because you didn't insure it properly, you didn't choose the right policy. So quite often what we're faced with is small-scale, high-impact events or large-scale, low-impact events, and that's what we're trying to mitigate against. Risk management is the technique you're trying to bring in, and good, effective risk management in the event planning phase reduces tolerable level. And tolerable is a really lovely term. It exists in law for a reason. Tolerable is one of the terms we actually look at. What is that tolerable level? And that's for each business to determine itself, what is your tolerable risk. It's not for us to tell you. I'm not going to do my background, it's not important enough. But I used to be working in local government, used to be an enforcement officer, used to prosecute people. That was good fun, I enjoyed that. And then I moved over to the dark side, and I then actually started defending and working with festivals, because I like festivals. I actually don't like music. How's that for bizarre? I know nothing about music, but I love festivals. I love the environment and the people and the richness. That's what I enjoy. So I can actually talk to the enforcers and try and negotiate a position that they may want to enforce, and I will try and negotiate why they shouldn't enforce, because you'll be standing against me probably when you're actually sort of defending or looking to prosecute. I'll be providing the defence, and I'm quite good at that. So we try and stop litigation, is what we try and do. We try and work through problems when it's in that sort of early stage, and usually it's not too bad. This graph on screen is basically showing you the phases of a disaster. This takes me a week to talk through, so we're not going to quite achieve that today. Google it, look it up, but this is how effectively disasters occur, and then the different phases of the pre-disaster, the impact, the heroic effect as everyone rushes in to help, which usually makes it worse. The honeymoon period, when you think things are going well, that's the disillusion, of course, with things that you really realise the reality, things are not going well. This is online, by the way. You can Google the actual phases of a disaster and look them up. And I put the reference at the bottom of Zen and Myers if you're really interested. It's a US model, but it works very, very effectively. So the disillusionment in the reconstruction phase, when you're actually trying to rebuild reputation, rebuild events, rebuild the whole package itself. So these are the critical things that you need to be ready for. Again, you can read this yourself. Your floods, your droughts, your wildfires, the thunderstorms, the electrical failure, and again, insurance claims. Whose fault was it to put fuel in the generator? You'll probably find that was yours. Explosions, if you're playing with fireworks, as soon as you put strange things together, they quite often go bang. Mixing chemicals in the toilets at the wrong time produces chlorine gas. Do you know the two to mix? I'm not going to tell you here, but if you find a smell of chlorine, that's one of the ones. But if you mix the wrong chemicals when you're cleaning toilets, you actually produce chlorine gas, which is not a good thing in a festival. We've had that before in Glastonbury. Crowd crush, traffic management, traffic incidents, all are plannable, foreseeable events. Therefore, you can risk mitigate, you can reduce the risk of things going wrong, looking at that risk management approach. Effects on people and equipment, and we talk about the well-being, the mental health, the fatigue. We're now 2 years plus into COVID. COVID's not finished. We're just going to live with it for a bit until there's a new variant. Do you know we're actually hitting the third wave of Omicron? B4 and B5 is just coming around the corner. So there's a lot more people going to get sick. If you've had COVID, how long are you safe for? 28 days is actually the right answer. The minimum reinfected period that's been recorded is 28 days after a full exposure to COVID. Wonderful. That's with 3 vaccinations. That's not even susceptible people. That's not vulnerable people. That's just the population. So we're living with seasonal COVID. Might even be more than a season. It could be 4 times a year, 4 seasons a year. That's a challenge we need to think about. COVID is here to stay. The crazy thing about COVID, it's a really fragile little virus. It could stop tomorrow. We just can't predict. It's a primeval little virus. It came from nowhere. It can disappear just as quick because it runs out of time. But that's another lecture again. Back onto this one. So cybersecurity, terrorism, all things that you should be planning for, all things that should be in your emergency plan and various other plans that you've got. How are you going to tackle all these hazards, and how are you going to be able to mitigate all these elements? Quick question, audience participation. Since 1980, how many people have been killed in disasters? Hands up, because it's audience participation, if you think it's 1 million, and I'm watching. Hands up if you think it's 10 million. One. Yeah, hesitant hand. 100 million? Oh, could be the majority. 1 billion or more? True answer? 1.6 billion. Let's put that in scale. Population of China, 1.4 billion. Or India, 1.4 billion. So you've just wiped out nearly 2 continents. Either or, it's not both, it's one or the other. So you don't have to wipe them both out. But there's a lot of people. In my opinion, because it's me that said it, a well-planned festival are inherently safe because you keep disasters in proportion. If you plan for it, you can mitigate it, you can manage it, and if you've actually planned for things to go wrong, you can deal with things going wrong. Expect things to go wrong. Most of them are predictable, foreseeable, etc., etc. Quick lesson. I've only got another 30 slides to go in 11 minutes, so we're probably not going to get them all done. Quick lecture on hazards and risk. Because if I ask you the question, you're going to deny it or you're going to lie. But let's just do let's assume you know. We're going to recap. What is the hazard? What is the risk? You don't have to shout out. I'll tell you the answer. Sharks and crocodiles are not a risk. They're hazards. Is there a risk here somewhere? No. No people. No people, no risk. Okay? Add people, what do we have? We have a hazard. Right? Could fall off, slips, trips, falls, most common forms of accident. But crocodiles and sharks at the bottom, just to take away all the mess. Is there a risk? Yes, there is. But we can calculate it, and we can then mitigate from that calculation. Then we get to hazard and unacceptable. So yes and yes. Moving on swiftly. So we need to do some calculations here. Everyone hates calculations. There's no right or wrong with this, remember. This is not an art, a defined art. This is a process. It's for a business to define its risk, for the business to actually work out the hazards and to do a risk assessment. And each business can do its own risk assessment. There's no right or wrong answer. You don't submit your risk matrix and say, is this okay? It's what you've determined it to be. So it's what advice you get from alleged experts, and there's no such thing as an expert. There's just people who talk a lot. Oh, that's me again. So how do you calculate risk? It's impact versus likelihood. And you're trying to reduce the risk to a tolerable level again. So you've all got one of these lovely coloured charts. Yeah? Is that a good one or a bad one? Oh, now you're not wanting to talk to me. Okay. That's a bad one. It's too simple. But that's what most emergency plans have got. So most plans have got is a simple chart, because that's what you've been sold. That's what somebody's put in the standard pack that you've bought and then rewritten and adapted. That doesn't work. Not for what we're doing in festivals. You need to have a complex risk matrix, because you need to make it real, and that's what the box is. You can't read it, but it'll be online at some point, and then you can read it. But that's what the boxes on the left talk about. They quantify, they try and quantify the actual hazards. So they define them in a way that you can understand either money terms or injuries or accidents. There's something meaningful behind it. So you can actually make a judgment on where your risk tolerance sits. And you change the colour of the boxes. These are not fixed green, yellows and reds. You decide what colours they are. What's your go, no-go state? Now, we talked about, is it the Blues Festival that had won COVID? That should never have happened. There should be litigation to take care of that. A go-no-go point of one COVID is irrelevant. That's not risk management, that's panic. That's bad evidence and bad decision-making by somewhere, by somebody, and should have been litigated against. Or, again, the insurance company should have said, here's $1 million, sue the government because they got it wrong, because that really shouldn't have happened. You don't change things for one. One is a statistical anomaly. It's not a reality. And that's what we've got to talk about in risk management. Risk management is common sense. When it don't make common sense, it isn't risk management. Prevention is better than cure. That's what risk management is trying to do, prevent things happening. But when they do happen, it's then managing it as it goes through a process. So I've got 7 minutes left to talk about Glastonbury, which is what you wanted to hear about in the first place. So a little bit of context for Glastonbury, population and size. So population of Turnville and population of Cairns. So what's the population of Glastonbury? Full festival, full load. Any idea? It's going to be close to that. That's why I put them up. So there's the legal level, and then there's the who snuck in. So I'll talk about both, because it's officially not 250,000. Population of Darwin, 129,000, getting closer. Launceston, 106,000 for our Tasmanian colleague over there. So the official weekend tickets, so for the whole festival, is 135,000 ticket sales. That's not the population on site. That's the people legitimately there with a ticket. That is the top-down site of the actual site. 5 farms in Somerset, Greenfield site before, Greenfield site after, with a 20-odd foot fence all the way around it to stop people getting in because they had so many people sneaking in. And then a 12-foot inner fence for those that manage to go over the 20-foot fence. They don't manage to go over it. Not nowadays. People really, really don't go over the fence or dig under it because the fence is dug in. We've learned that as well. People are quite inventive. They used to run cars down the hill and smash into the fence. That's how we test the fence. To actually run cars down the hill to see if it smashes it. So we've, again, learning curve. Because the reason we do it is not because we don't want people to go into the festival, enjoy the festival. It's crowd numbers. We can actually manage 100,000 people on site because that's what we plan for. We plan to manage peak performances as we go around the site. So another couple of bits of stats. So you start, the yellow circle is the pyramid stage, probably the most famous stage out there. But look at how many other stages there are. This is a big site, a lot of people moving around. These are the tenting areas. I don't have a spot here that works, but you can see all the areas around it are tenting. All the nice little neat lines, that's cars, usually bogged in, but they're still cars. But we manage that as well. We've got teams of tractors. We give free tickets to all the young local boys who can drive a tractor. Not well, but when you're stuck in mud, they'll tow you out, and you're thankful. The fact that they're drunk is another question, but you can drive in a straight line on a field, and because they're not on the road, so it's not illegal. Moving swiftly. So we also have 5,000 Sunday tickets sold to the locals to try and keep them quiet so they don't complain. Because basically for the best part of 2 weeks, the place is at a standstill, an absolute standstill. All the roads are one way, everyone's got special passes. It's a massive infrastructure, a massive administration exercise. And they've got it down perfect because it works and it keeps working. 37,500 paid staff or workers on site, including volunteers, Greenpeace volunteers, people picking up rubbish volunteers. The build-in phase is enormous. The sort of the build-out phase is just as complicated. Every bit of fecal matter that is deposited by people that wouldn't go to the toilets is picked up. Right? That's a job I don't do. For weeks they go into the bushes digging out bits of poo. Why? Because the zoonotic risk of actually transferring something disease onto the animals is severe. So we check that. This is it on a good day. Nice green field, nice music, nice relaxing atmosphere. It's a brilliant festival when it's all kind of cool. But it does get muddy because it's Somerset. It's also in a basin, which probably doesn't help in the design phase. But we talked about mitigation, we talked about that, and I want to just cover a couple of little bits quite quickly in my last 3.5 minutes. So that's the pyramid stage when it's empty. So that means there's something on somewhere else, because we plan to move the population around. Part of the scheduling is it's done centrally, so we actually know roughly. There's a pyramid stage and then there's an alternative stage, and they always play big bands at the same time, because the maximum you can get in front of the pyramid stage is about 65,000. That means there's a lot of people somewhere else on site doing other stuff, so we make sure there's something else for them to go and do. So programming is really important. And that's a real skill in itself. And then that population movement, we monitor it, because we've got pinch points. This is again rural Somerset with small bridges and small alleyways. So people have to sort of cross over streams on little stone bridges. So we'll build and extend the bridges. Part of the investment that the farmers locally have done is looking at that sort of population movement, looking at the waterways, because there's about 3 or 4 streams run through there, protecting the environment, protecting the waterways to reduce the actual contamination, and actually setting up automatic monitoring sites to deal with that. I'm going to put a shout out, because I'm doing a workshop on Thursday morning, and I'm going to talk about a couple of disasters that didn't happen, but nearly did, in the festival site, and we'll talk about environmental damage, and we'll talk about risk to population, and we'll talk about, again, mitigation steps and how we actually went through decision-making processes in real time to try and not make people sick. And the reality is most people didn't know the things were happening at the times they were happening, because we managed them properly. So, told you about the numbers. 1,000 live performances, 80 venues and stages. The market's selling crap, but people buy it, so they're happy. 450 food stalls out there, every one of them inspected and checked to be safe for selling food continuously. I ran the food team for a few years as one of my jobs. We invented a traffic light system: red, amber, yellow. You can work out what it means. Green, sorry. Yellow and amber is the same. Red, amber and green. If you got a green tag, keep going. You got a yellow tag, I'm watching you. Red tag, you're closed. Really simple solution. If you don't close voluntarily, you know the best bit about it? I then bring in a Hilux machine, scoop up the tent and take it away. We did it 3 times. You only got to do it once, we thought, but we did it 3 times. Physically removed a caravan from site because they were trading illegally. It's gone. Problem solved. So that's risk mitigation in the extremis. But that's the power you can have if you've got a licensed site. You control that site. You are responsible for that site. You manage that site. That's what we did. Farm to festival to farm within 4 months. The cows come off, then the cows come back on again. It is a working dairy farm, as all the farms are. So we've got the wet and the muddy bit. You all hear about that. So we put trackways in. We buy or hire metal trackways, put them down so the main roadways are protected, so we can get the ambulances in, the fire brigade in, and the police in, and casualties out if we have to. We've got on-site medical treatment facilities and a dentist. There's always one baby born in Glastonbury, and they really try and time it to be born in Glastonbury. There's always some bugger dies in Glastonbury, sometimes more intentionally than others, but no, actually, there's never been a murder that we're aware of, but there's overdoses and all sorts of stuff. So we've got drug testing, free drug testing goes on there. Bring along your SAP. That's my time up. Well, that's saying my time's up. Maybe it is. But we do free drug testing actually on site, so people can check what drugs they've got, so they're as safe as they can be. We've got rehab areas, we've got mental health teams, we've got people looking after people all the time there. It's a massive infrastructure, taking years to build up. 37,500 staff. That's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff. If I was going to get sick probably anywhere in the world, I would want to be sick there, because they've got literally a miniature hospital. And very fast evacuation, helicopter access and ambulance access right off the festival. So it's really, really well done from that point of view. We don't tend to kill people once we've got hold of them. There's defibs all over the site. There's pharmacies on site. It's a city almost for 4 days. So again, we've got to deal with this sort of thing. Preparation of food outdoors when the weather changes. When it's nice and sunny, that's okay. Well, not really, because it's dusty. Dust contains bacteria. We need to manage the dust, keep the dust down for the food preparation. That sort of site we serve notices on and actually sort of take the food away or tip the food out if we have to. And everyone that comes on site has got a food safety qualification, which I happen to sell in my stand just outside. But we make sure that every single food business has got a recent food safety qualification, so they're actually, we know they're safe to practice. Or at least we know they've got the knowledge, and then we watch them to make sure they're safe to practice. Just a couple more slides. This is the outside preparation stuff. People think tin foil's wonderful. That aluminium foil solves all problems. No, it doesn't. It just looks shiny, that's all. So we don't let them use that. It's got to be actually proper washable surfaces. This is the standard of catering we do achieve. First world, high quality, good quality catering. That's the benchmark that we aim for, and that's the standard we're looking for. And we show that to people. We send photographs out to say, this is what we expect. Don't come sort of looking to do some crappy kitchen, because that's not acceptable. It's got to be this sort of standard. You'll make good money here. There's a lot of competition for people to come to the festival. Therefore, you will, if you're selling a good product, you'll make good money. So don't come here sort of with no wash hand basins and no catering and no shampoo or no etc., etc. It's got to be the right standard. And it's not a temporary food premises. This is actually got to be permanent, is what we're setting up. As I say, it gets muddy. So we also, where the people go, where population is, we'll actually dig sumps in the ground and put hundreds of tons of hardcore down so the water can actually soak away. But it does eventually fill up the fields. As we said, the water table does rise. And we have this, and we say to people, it's going to be wet, prepare for the weather. We also sell on site sort of raincoats and welly boots and all sorts of stuff if people need it. But people like walking around. But they know that's a possibility. So if you inform people that's a reality, then they come prepared. Preparation is important. Good times, had by all. That's what we aim for. And a successful festival people come back to. And we keep getting 175,000 people coming back, so there must be something decent. Last couple of bits I wanted to say, disasters about drills, having good drills in place. And I've got one slide left for lessons identified that I just wanted to share, which is about having your plans is one thing, because that's planning. But a plan that actually doesn't have a risk register is not enough. Risk register says you've identified and thought of what your problems are, and you put in place steps to actually sort of mitigate and work out your tolerable level. Actions on card. In a crisis, people don't think, they panic. If you've got an actions on card and you turn it round and it says, actions on, phone for help. That's the first thing. Tell somebody who's in charge and get resources to try and help you. So most of the stuff is really common sense, but we print a 10-point action on card so people can go, what am I supposed to do? Oh, that's right, don't panic. That's the first thing. If you see somebody that needs first aid, are you a trained first aider? Then don't do anything. Get a trained first aider. So we train lots of people who are first aiders, etc., etc. So actions on card stops people thinking the wrong thing. It guides them in that first 2 to 5 minutes of a panic and lets people, assets, come to play and actually start making decisions. Because most things are solvable, but panic makes it worse. Or panic gives you bad decisions, because we're not trained, as I say, in common sense. No one gets a certificate of common sense. I wish it did. Scenario driven. I run scenarios about the what if, what would, how could you help, etc. And sitting down with management teams and actually going through before a festival. Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Oh, it's in the action plan. Oh, it's in the M plan. Yeah, but do you understand it? Just because it's in a plan, do you actually know anything about it? And half the time they know nothing about it. Oh, I'll read it at a time. Too late. So we go through 4 or 5 scenarios, get used to talking to people, understanding people's capabilities, understanding the resources they've got. Oh, I've got 10 people that can do that. I didn't know that. Because you've talked it through with people. You've talked to the different managers. You've talked to the different department heads. And you've helped them understand what your capability is. Who's the person who is calmest in a crisis? That's the one that should be in charge. And that happens, hopefully, when you go through these scenarios. Rehearse duties and responsibilities. I'm the managing director. I make all the decisions. Yeah, but what does that mean in reality? Oh, I know nothing and I just tell people to get on with it. That's not in charge then. Leadership versus management. There's a big difference. Last point I want to make is what's called a critical friend. That's a role that I invented trying to find the middle ground between the enforcement agency, the regulator, and the festival. And you employ safety officers, most of which are not very well qualified, I'll tell you. But it doesn't matter, it looks good on paper, you've got a safety officer. But you need something extra to that. You need somebody who's looking at the side, somebody who's actually, like me, saying, is that the best we can do? What is your list? What's your top 10 hazards that you need to be looking at next time? Because your safety officer deals with, with the event then and there, and is on to another festival or another job somewhere else, because they go from job to job. That's what they're paid to do. They're not investing in your festival unless you've organically grown a safety officer. That's the best one, because then they understand your business, they understand your festival, and that's really what you're looking for. Not a fly in, fly out with a certificate that may be valid or not. What's their background? Half of them are mechanics, no disrespect to mechanics, but how does that mean I'm good festival safety officers? Oh, I can fix your truck. Okay, this is the last slide by everyone. So if that's your emergency plan or recovery plan, and that's just a call out for come and have another chat on Thursday. We're probably out of time, but any questions? Excellent, no.